I've often lamented that the only constant in the antiques and collectibles trade is change. And today we're going to talk about the latest speculative collectible craze that is taking the internet and even high fashion by storm. So make no mistake, if you really want to know what this is, you probably already read the video description, the video title. You know where we're going with this, but just bear with me because we really have to talk about this. This is very fascinating. Now, if I'm doing this properly, you can see my screen and you can hear my voice. So obviously, there was a massive speculative craze with PEZ dispensers that occurred right alongside, believe it or not, the advent of eBay. Now, you probably didn't realize it at the time because another popular product that became a thing during this particular point in time, right around 94, 96, was of course the popularity of Thai Beanie Babies. But I want to start talking about PEZ because PEZ was formed in 1927. And if you can see my screen, I'm on the current PEZ company website. And still to this very day, even in 2025, they do of course produce current modern era candy dispensers, and they do sell very well. The company is very profitable. People, to a lesser extent, less now than they did back in the 90s and early 2000s, do still collect these products. And yes, if you are at a yard sale and you do find some of the vintage coveted PEZ dispensers that were produced in the 1960s, early 1970s, some of them can still sell for a premium on the secondary market through sites like eBay. Now, obviously, the demand for even vintage PEZ dispensers has died down over the years. As a matter of fact, if I really wanted to do an analysis of this market, I can show you, I have a graph somewhere that shows actually how much PEZ dispensers have appreciated, especially the vintage ones from the 60s and 70s. And you will see, if we look at it right now, if I would attempt to put that graph on screen, which I'm not because I don't have it in electronic form, meaning it's not saved on my computer anywhere that I can show you, you would see that right around 2015, the graph pretty much peaked, and now it is starting to flatline and also descend in value, meaning most vintage PEZ dispensers are actually falling in value at present time due to a weakening in demand in this market. The average PEZ collector is from the baby boom generation. And this is an interesting collecting category that will eventually die out. That doesn't mean, though, that the company cannot remain profitable. For those unaware, PEZ is actually located in Austria, and it is actually one of the country's most profitable companies. Now, that's not saying much. Obviously, Austria, from an industrial perspective, isn't on par with the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, or Japan. But still, it is a profitable company, make no mistake. And even in the US, they have sales in the tens of millions of dollars, even to this very day. Now, what's interesting about PEZ, though, while the PEZ bubble was engulfing a lot of people on eBay, on online auctions, because this was back in the mid-90s, it had just became a thing. Obviously, we all know what happened with Beanie Babies. And for those unaware, this is the current Beanie Baby website that I am showing you. And I'm doing this to make a point that you can have products that once went through a speculative frenzy, a speculative bubble, a speculative craze, that are still being produced today, where the companies are still in existence, the items are still profitable, but the pieces they produce are not really seen as valid collectibles. And this is something that a lot of people get wrong. People think that there's going to be a reemergence in demand in a lot of the vintage, coveted 1990s era Beanie Babies. And to be fair, I want to address this. There are certain Beanie Babies from the coveted 1990s era that do have value in the secondary market. What I have always been arguing against is I would never ever attempt to invest in those items long term. Now, obviously, if you're watching this channel, Reserved Investments, where we talk about collectible finance, I'm assuming most of my viewers already know that. We have gone in depth on understanding how these markets work over the short term and over the long term. And I'm sure that most of you would agree Beanie Babies really are not an investable product, number one. And number two, they're really not going to come back in vogue anytime soon. And this is something that I sometimes have to get into heated discussions with people, just like going back to PEZ. PEZ really isn't going to come back in vogue anytime soon. These are collecting categories that ran their proverbial course. It's pretty much over for a lot of these items as collectibles. But make no mistake, the ideas and what these things represent still lives on. Case in point, I have long critiqued Funko Pops. And for those that can see my screen, this is the current Funko Pop website. Obviously, Funko Pops are being released, marketed, and sold to this very day in the year 2025. It's very interesting because when I started this YouTube channel roughly 5 years ago, there were people that would argue with me whenever I would call Funko Pops Beanie Babies 2.0. Well, ironically, as time went on, the market kind of revealed itself, and you can see Funko Pops are not a good long-term investment in most cases. And I have been preaching this since the advent of this channel, that if you are going to diversify assets into the antiques and collectibles trade, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. Now, full honesty here. If you go to a yard sale, if you go to a flea market, and you're really hip, you're really up to date on the Funko Pop collecting market, I'm not telling you if you come across one of these that is selling for $1, $2, $5, and you know you can flip it for 50 bucks, by all means, do you. That's taking a short-term gain. That is what I'm all about in a lot of these speculative markets. But I would not tell you to be that end of the rainbow buyer where you're spending $50 on that piece, thinking that it's going to go to $100, that it's going to go to $200, that's going to become $500 or more sometime in the future. That is insane because all of these products are marketed using mass-produced scarcity. And now, even before we get talking about Labubus, we also have to talk about this particular company because believe it or not, limited run games make some excellent products, but make no mistake, the market is becoming very saturated for these particular products. A lot of them really aren't even collectible anymore because let's be realistic, you really don't need to own the physical version of the game when you can download it directly from the Nintendo online store, the PlayStation store, the whatever we're talking about here. Now, it's true, eventually those servers are going to get shut off. But it doesn't mean you're going to end up 100% of the time with a valuable collectible as a result, because what's happening right now with video games, as we can see right here, and where was I want it to go coming soon. If you can see right here, a lot of these companies that make these classic games, they just keep releasing them in different packages. So this is something that really needs to be examined in a video on its own where we talk about this, especially those of you that like the wonderful invention known as the Evercade. If you don't know what an Evercade is, please look it up. A lot of these companies are getting smart and they're just re-releasing their classic games on different platforms, in different compilations, in different games that are being released and produced for all the newest consoles, and even some of the classic consoles, once again, through limited run games and the like. So what's happening is we're taking games that were once kind of uncommon, kind of somewhat scarce, and we're making them readily available. And this is becoming a thing that is really going to affect the collectability of a lot of these items going forward. And it's sad to say, a lot of video game collectors and speculators are unaware of this at present time. They just buy these things and they go, video games go up in value. Video games are collectible, not understanding that the only constant in all of these markets is change. And believe it or not, limited run games was a catalyst that will eventually affect the collectability of a lot of these games going forward, for better or worse. Now, with all that out of the way, I do have to say, limited run games does make some incredible products. If you are a fan, like we're looking at this, the Toppling collection, if you're a fan of any of these games, yes, I would tell you, you can do a lot worse than spending 35 bucks for a copy of some of these best shooters that ever graced consoles. I mean, this collection right here includes Tiger Healy, Flying Shark, Twin Cobra, Fire Shark, and a ton more of great games. So you can see there's a ton of playability on these collections. That doesn't mean the collectability is going to automatically go along with that. So now that we talked about limited run games, we talked about PEZ, we talked about Thai Beanie Babies, we talked about Funko Pops. Let's now talk about, guess what? Labubus. If you don't know what a Labubu is, it is produced by a company called Pop Mart, which is out of China. Now, before we go any further, I always consider it very interesting how we have a company like Funko Pop, Pop Mart, where they put pop right in their name. Now, I am well aware that the pop really stands for pop culture. But it's very interesting that there is a secondary hidden meaning to these terms as well, and I don't even think the manufacturers who come up with these terms are even aware of this. If we look at Funko Pops, this is a bubble that will eventually pop. If we look at Labubus, this is a bubble that will eventually pop. So it's very interesting to me how a company like Funko Pop, Pop Mart, they have pop in their name, already symbolizing what's going to happen to this market. Now, Labubus are these products that look like, I'll show you some right here on the screen. They are blind box packed, and they kind of look like a little soft, plushy, gremlin deformed critter. Well, what kind of happened with this company is a lot of celebrities and social media influencers started gravitating to these items, and they started buying them. And what they would do is they would actually attach them to high-end handbags. So believe it or not, there are celebrities walking around right now that have a Hermes Birkin bag that retails for like $10,000, and they have one of these Labubus hanging on it, and it became the latest collectible craze. So right now, even if you go on eBay, you can see items like this, that this already sold. This sold for $133.90. So people are really buying up these items, and some, like if you do a search of completed listings, you can see some of these items that are selling for close to $1,000, because again, most of the products in the Labubu line, especially the Monsters line, they are blind box packed, so you don't know which one you're going to get. So obviously, mass-produced scarcity. We don't know how many of each are out there. There's going to be people with money that are willing to pay a premium for this. Now, why am I doing a video on this? Because believe it or not, in the age of tariffs, in the age where almost every week you hear a negative story about toy companies that are embattled with debt or facing bankruptcy, even Mattel is struggling right now. And if you're not aware, Mattel owns Barbie, they own Hot Wheels, they own Masters of the Universe, which they really never did anything with, because the generation like me that grew up with Masters of the Universe, it's fondly in my memory, but younger generations just are not gravitating towards it like we were back in the 1980s. But Mattel has really been struggling as of late. Even Hasbro, even the Lego Corporation, and I know a lot of you guys are going to gasp and say, no, Sean, the Lego Corporation is selling great right now, record-breaking sales. If you actually look, there has been a pullback in that market. A lot of resellers, a lot of speculators, a lot of so-called Lego investors are now getting burned because the company is just putting out too many products, and they're doing what is called Amazon dumps, where Lego is taking a lot of their extra stock, they're discounting it heavily, and they're dumping it on Amazon. So there's so much product circulating out there that the Lego investor resale market is a mess at present time. I am going to be doing another video on that soon, just to make you guys aware of what's going on. And yes, it'll probably be a screen share video, so I can kind of show you some real life examples of how much that market has changed just within the last 5 to 10 years. It's very fascinating, to say the least. Well, this is what's interesting about Labubus and their parent company, Pop Mart. Believe it or not, in 2024, they've experienced a 900% revenue growth, and they did $410 million in sales. Most of that came from this Labubu line. That's how insane people are going after these little deformed critters. All because social media influencers and celebrities are attaching these to Hermes Birkin bags, other high-end bags, and people are just going nuts to buy them. Now, to be fair, I understand what you guys are gonna say. If somebody wants to spend like $100 or a couple $100 and they just want to get a Labubu, it's probably not gonna break them. Let's be realistic. But you guys know where this is going. There's gonna be people out there that really think this is gonna be a legitimate collectible going forward, and they're gonna go all in, and they're going to park massive amounts of money in this market. Just like what happened with Beanie Babies, what happened with PEZ, what happened with Funko Pops. Here we are, Beanie Babies 3.0. So I just want to bring this to your attention. If this video has been informative in any way, please feel free to share it. Please feel free to give me your comments and feedback below in the comment section so that I know if I should create more videos like this, or if we should go into a deeper dive talking about Labubus, or heaven forbid, Beanie Babies, PEZ dispensers, Funko Pops, limited run video games, all these speculative markets. You have to really be careful if you're diversifying assets to the antiques and collectibles trade. And you have to understand that some markets are best positioned for growth only in the short term, not long term. And my main criticism of a lot of the people out there that get caught up in these markets, they think that antique and collectible markets are constant. Always remember, the only constant in the antiques and collectibles trade is change. These markets are always changing and evolving before your very eyes. And it's not always for the best. Remember, if we get in my DeLorean time machine and we go back to the 1980s or the 1990s, there were record-breaking sales for Lionel toy trains, space tin toy robots from the 1960s. There were a lot of pop culture items that were selling into the stratosphere. Today, a lot of those markets died off. So you have to be really careful if you are going to diversify in the antiques and collectibles trade. There really are few markets that make up the antiques and collectibles trade that are designed like an index fund where you can passively invest in those markets. Most of these markets require you to put your hand on the pulse and make sure that when the hype builds, you sell into the hype and you take a profit. Now, obviously, if you're investing in coins, currency, historical documents, rare first edition books, certain pieces of high-end art, certain edged weapons, firearms, those markets work different than most markets that make up the antiques and collectibles trade. More on that in another video. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a great day.